these modules will focus on the Rotary Foundation district and global grants, certification, and global and peace scholarships. So let me make sure my slide set is working here. And so these are some of the folks that you will be hearing from. You'll be hearing from our incoming governor, Roger Pascal. We'll have Dan Steele talking about the district grants. Scott Hendricks will be talking about global grants. Conrad Heed will be covering global scholarships. And Jim Quick will be covering the Peace Fellow Program or the Peace Scholar Program. So that would be our group that we'll be covering tonight. And this is the next chart is our agenda. So I'll take a few minutes. Roger and I would, I guess I'll give Roger a few minutes to say hello, and he will be available for questions and answers during the presentation or at the end of the presentations. One of the things I'll focus on here in just a minute is making sure that we do get your names of the folks that are here so that we can give you credit for being trained in the grant certification. So then the first session, we'll have Dan Steele talking about district grants and stewardship and certification. Scott Hendricks will cover global grant certification, and global grant scholarships will be covered by Conrad Heed, and later Peace Fellowships by Jim Quick. And I haven't heard from Jim, but is he on the line? I just want to make sure he had gotten here. I guess he'll be along directly if he's not here.
I just unmuted, Paul.
Yeah, I'm here. I just hit a wrong button, so you don't see me, but I'm here.
Okay, great. And so I'll start off with just a little introduction here. And one of the things that I'd like to reinforce is that the grant program is kind of a pay it forward program, that it really starts with all of us. The grant funding starts with the club setting a goal for every Rotarian every year. It really kind of depends on trying to get at least an average of $100 per capita into the annual program fund share account or fund. After 3 years, those funds start coming back to be available for matching grants for matching district grants and for global grants. After 3 years, that money is, the money that goes to the World Fund initially, 50% does go for district designated funds, and the other 50% goes for world funds. And those world funds are used to do things like doing matching funds, as well as other projects that are handled directly. So one thing that I do like to remind people is, I guess first thing here is a report that's available to all clubs on how they're doing with regard to some of these, with regard to how they're doing against their goals. And so in this chart, hopefully all of y'all are familiar with this, but you can get this from myrotary.org and for your club and see how you're doing with regard to have you set goals for your club? How are you doing year to date and so forth? Now, in this case, on this fundraising analysis, one of the things to be aware of is that you can put money into the annual programs fund, and if you don't specify the share account, then those funds may go directly to another event or another project. But if you specify share, that is the money that comes back to be available in the way of district designated funds to match grants that you do at the district level. So that's a very important factor. And in the example here, I don't know if you can read the numbers very well, but these are two different reports. The one on top is the club fundraising analysis, and it shows this club contributed $17,902 in the year 2017-18.
Hey, Paul, I think all we're getting right now is where it says pay it forward.
Oh, I'm sorry. There you go. I'm looking at, well, there we go. Here, we'll flip on down here and see.
Thanks,
Yeah, here.
Roger. I was just sending a message.
Okay, great. So thank you very much, Roger. I appreciate that. What I'm showing you is two reports, and the one at the top is the club fundraising analysis. And it is showing that how much that particular club, the example club, contributed in the year 17-18, and it was 17,902 by the numbers that are coming from the club fundraising analysis. However, in the share contribution detail, it shows for that same year 16,902. So it's off by $1,000, and all that means is that the club that in this example had contributed this upper amount of 17,902 to the annual programs fund, but they had specified one of their contributions to go to one of the other funds. And so you see, I think I showed this here in that you can see that in the multiple donor form that if you check share, that comes back in the way of DDF, but you can check a number of other things that would either go straight to the World Fund or the Endowment Fund or the Rotary Peace Centers or to respond to disasters. And so if you check respond to disasters, that's a wonderful fund, but that's not going to generate matching grants or DDF in 3 years. And so it's something to be aware of as you have expectations of what might be covered. If you give money to polio, that's a wonderful fund, and we want you to give money to polio, but that does not generate DDF or matching funds later on. So those are things to be aware of. So what that means is in 3 years, a district grant, when you put up a certain amount of money, then there's a match that would equal that would double your efforts there. And it even works at a higher level when you're doing global grants, because the World Fund tries to incent global grants, and so they match not only the cash that is being put in, but they also match the DDF that the district puts in for these global grants. So that's something to be aware of. And this is just a chart that's available in various Rotary publications. If you go to grants.rotary.com, there's a lot of really great resources there, and it would explain how the process works in more detail. But just in this example, if you were a club of 40 members and each gave $100, and so you were putting in $4,000, and 3 years later, 1,000 of that would go into would match your DDF for district, and 2,000 of it would match the global grant. So for money that you might be putting in for the new year, you would get a 1-for-1 match for district grants, and you actually get a grant of, if you put in $2,000, say for a global grant, you'd get a DDF match of $2,000 plus a World Fund match of $3,000 for a total of $7,000. And so the totals would be, for your investment of $3,000, you would be getting district grants and global grants that would total up to about $9,000 for your total project. So that's certainly a benefit when you do invest in the annual programs fund share account. The Rotary Foundation committee in our district is made up of quite a few great people, and this is an org chart that you may have seen before, but it's available on the website as well. We have a fundraising arm, and those group of folks will be doing an assembly training session next week on Thursday night at 7:30 on a Zoom meeting, and I hope many of you will be taking part of that. Of course, the way we're doing this session tonight, we would normally be doing it at a college somewhere where we'd be doing a lot of these, this training overlapped. It's kind of a benefit to be able to spread it out and do these online so that you get to see more of the sessions. So in the grants area, I've already, I guess, gone through who's going to be making presentations tonight. Scott and Conrad and Jim and Dan will be covering those areas. Paul Geisel is one of the great foundation speakers that we've had for many years, and he's a good person to contact for speakers. And we have a stewardship committee that kind of keeps an eye on how we're doing with our processes and our record keeping and so forth, and that would be Joyce Stanton and Larry Petrash. Sharon Miles is an assistant regional Rotary Foundation chair, and so we're very lucky to have her as also helping us out directly in our district, and so she's kind of our right-hand man there. So I'll briefly go through some of the events that we have during the year that our foundation committee is involved in. President-elect training, we did a grant certification there, and we also covered a module in the president training as well, and so we were involved in that. District leadership training we had last night, where we had all of our committee members brainstorming about how we're doing things and kind of reassessing how we're doing things and new things that we can be doing in the future. We are doing these assembly modules this week and next week. We will be involved in the Vibrant workshop, which includes a component which we traditionally used to call the Rotary Foundation Seminar, and I believe that's scheduled for July 18th. And we hope that'll be a face-to-face one, but we'll see when we get further down the road. In the October timeframe, we do Global Scholar interviews. Peter Scott's conference, DG Peter Scott, is scheduled for October 1 through 3. And so we might be combining some of our efforts for this Rotary year, the new Rotary year, with Peter's year at that time. We might be having a foundation event in either fourth quarter of this year or possibly first quarter of next year to do some recognition. The Peace Fellow interviews will be probably in the April-May timeframe, and Jim Quick will talk to you a little bit more about that. And then Roger has a conference, I guess, lined up for the May timeframe of next year. So those are some of the events we have lined up. And Peter, not Peter, but Roger, do you have any comments that you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, sorry about that. Yes, we're diligently working right now to get various types of Zoom trainings put into place for May and June. Once again, Paul mentioned that we're looking to do the event at the Alito Church in July, on July the 18th. We're being that what we're going through right now, we really need to work hard on making sure that the presidents, the incoming presidents, and the incoming teams on these on the clubs are very viable and trying to get the clubs back up and rolling. We're concerned about membership. We need to make sure our clubs are very much on board with doing some type of connection, Zoom meetings or something right now. So if you're involved in any clubs out there, we're working with some AGs to Peter and I are, to make sure that we have an idea of what clubs aren't doing any types of Zoom meetings or online meetings, and working to get them on board with that. But other than that, I think we're going to have a great year, and I appreciate Paul and everybody else for putting this together tonight.
Thank you. So with that, I will, now we're right on time so far. That's great. And we have Dan Steele coming up to talk to us about district grants and getting certified for that. And Dan, I guess I have a clicker here. So if you either give me a hand signal, or if you tap on something, I'll just try to make sure I go forward when you're ready.
We'll see how this works.
All right. Let me make sure I better get on down there. Oh, I had more stuff here. Something's not working right here. Oh, I guess maybe I better go open up another slide set. That's all right. Just had to open up the new slide set here. Okay, Dan, here we go.
Okay. So basically the process is pretty much the same as it's been in the past. We've made a few changes to this, but so for a lot of you, this is just probably a review. If you're new, then this is all new information. As a reminder, all this information is on the district website under the Rotary Foundation page under district grants on the left-hand column. All the forms, this presentation are all available for you to download and utilize. So be sure and do that when you have a chance, so you'll have all that information at hand. So when we do the grant management training, we're trying to make sure that all our projects have proper financial control, that we adhere to technical standards, that we meet the needs of the beneficiaries that we're doing grants for, that the grants fulfill the objectives as they're written, and that we safeguard the funds that we have and make sure that they're not used improperly. Okay, Paul, there you go. The first thing we need to do is talk about the Club Memorandum of Understanding. This is a document that has several pages to it. It has a sheet in the front that kind of explains it, and then there's a transmittal form where you put the two people that have taken grant training, and then there are 4 places: the financial management plan, club officer responsibilities, report the misuse of grants form. There's 4 places that the president-elect needs to sign, and then this needs to be uploaded when you enter your grant information. Okay, Paul. Okay, our successful district grant projects need to meet community needs. So you need to look around the community, find needs that you can help, that your club can participate in. If you have partners, you need to make sure you're communicating with them on a frequent basis. Have a plan to implement your grant, depending on what it is, and then maintain stewardship of funds, which means you need to utilize the funds the way they're supposed to be and do your reporting that needs to be done in a timely manner. And that's the responsibility of the club to do that and the people involved. If there's any irregularities, then the district needs to be notified, and so that things can be taken care of. And then timely submission of reports. And that seems to be one of the things that people are a little bit slow about. They may write their checks and do their project in October or November, but they still haven't finished out their reporting even at this time of the year. So timely submission of the reports is really important. It really helps the district grant chair to finish out and close out all these grants. So please help. Your district grant is really a 1 year project. It has to be opened and closed out in 1 year. The club is responsible for the grant funds. The checks all have to be written from your club for the project. You can't do credit cards and use those as showing that you paid. You have to have checks so that you can have a cleared check and a canceled check and a bank statement when you do your reporting. And again, there's talking about implementing the club MOU. So we can go on, Paul. Okay, district grants are administered by the district, not by Rotary International. So they're a little different than the global grants. They're short-term service projects. They address immediate needs at home or abroad. Some clubs are doing district grants in other countries. As long as they can do it and get the grant reporting done and everything, that works fine. Okay. So the type of projects, you use service projects, scholarships, vocational training, youth services, RILA scholarships, anything in that area. Keep going. Okay, some criteria. All dues to RI in the district and your 990 IRS filing have to be current and have to be the 990 has to be uploaded to the application of the matching grants website. You cannot have any district grants open from prior years. 2 people from the club must participate in the district grant certification. It's been that way for some time, and we still need you to have at least 2 people from your club. The other thing I would say is it would really be helpful if those 2 people are involved in submitting the grant and administering the grant from your club. Sometimes we have people who are doing that, but they haven't had grant training for several years because they know how to do everything. And sometimes they miss on some things and don't know what they need to do. So it's helpful if the people that do the grant training are directly involved in administering the grant. It's important for your club to regularly support the Rotary Foundation. And as Paul was telling you about the share funds and everything, if your club doesn't give very much money, then there's not much share for you to participate with. Okay, on the memo of understanding, that's kind of going back and repeating, but it has to be signed by the president and president-elect of your club. It would really be helpful, and it's really very helpful if you have a foundation chairman in your club that can kind of have a committee that works on these grant projects and can come up with these things in a more organized fashion. It also helps in your fundraising for the foundation. These district grants do not have to support the 6 areas of focus like your global grants do. When you apply for your grant, you have to go to matchinggrants.org. You need to upload your signed memorandum of understanding and your most recent 990 filing, IRS filing prior to submission of the grant for consideration. This year we have something new. The clubs must enter 13 of 25 goals in Rotary Club Central, and that includes the Rotary Foundation goals. And we've never required this in the past, but this year Roger wanted to include that and he wants the clubs to get their goals in. So you must enter 13 of 25 of the goals in Rotary Club Central. The grant application, when you get it submitted, then it is sent by the grant chair, me, for digital signing. and you'll receive an email, and it'll have a 4-digit number, and you go to a link that's right above that number and put that digital signature number in. That completes the digital signature for the application for your grant. Okay, Paul. Okay, each club will be guaranteed DDF, and that's district designated funds for some who are not quite as familiar with that, up to 25% of their annual programs fund giving for the 2017-2018 Rotary year on the share contribution detail report for 2021, which is what Paul was had up earlier. Clubs not applying, the first grant consideration is September the 1st this year rather than August the 1st. Clubs not applying by this date will be considered for November 1st award dates. Grants considered in November will be based on funds available with priority given to the club's giving history. And there's a district grant highlight sheet that's on the district website. You can look on that. It has all this information on there so that you can see how that's done. So the committee looks at the amount of DDF that you have, and then they consider the 3-year average per capita giving as they look at these grants to approve. Okay, Paul. If any funds remain after the September 1st submission, then the next submission window is November the 1st. If any funds remain after that submission, then the next window is February the 1st, 2021. Okay, Paul. Online application, you can go onto www.matchinggrants.org and start, put in the 2021 year and start your application. Applications will be accepted until September 1st for DDF guarantee. And then again, the second round, if funds are available November 1st, and the third round, if funds are available on February the 1st. Okay, Paul. Applications should be submitted online, like I said, at www.matchinggrants.org/district as early as possible in the submission window up to the end of July, actually that should be up to the end of August, prior to the September 1st deadline. This is what the website looks like. So you go to the website, then you tap on district grants. You can go ahead, Paul. And it will look like this. So you go up to the top and you click on My Account. Go ahead, Paul, and it'll show. Brings up this screen. You can put your email address and your password in, and you can log in. Go ahead. Then it goes to submit a project, and it talks about that, gives you some instructions. Has some terms and conditions for Rotary Foundation grants and global grants. Then you hit submit a new project. Go ahead, Paul. And it brings up this page, and this is where you put your name, your email address, the project title, the country it's going to be done in, the location like Arlington, Texas, or Graham, Texas, or whatever. Be sure and put the Rotary year 2020-21. And then you can mark an area of a focus, but that's not all that critical with the district grants. Then you do a project summary like dictionaries for third graders or something of that nature, and then describe your project in more detail in the project description. Okay, Paul. This is project description. Then at the bottom, project contact person, District 5790, your contact name, Rotary Club of whatever your club is, your email address, what your budget is, your club contribution, your district contribution. So if you have a $5,000 project, Your club contribution is going to be $2,500. Your district contribution is going to be $2,500, and that's what you're asking for the district to approve, $2,500 in DDF. If you only have $1,000 in DDF, but you have a $4,000 project, that's fine as long as your club spends more money than the same amount or more money than your DDF, then that works great. Then we need a contact number at the bottom. Make your checks payable to Rotary Club of XYZ with the address, city, state, and zip. And then check the box to certify that the project fits within the guidelines and say save. Okay, Paul. When you go to put in your documents, if you hit the administration button at the top, which is, it shows where it says back to project, originally you hit the administration button. This is where you can load your documents. You choose file, go to your computer, find it, you name it what it needs to be, like MOU or Form 990 or canceled checks, canceled bank statements, anything that you want to be restricted, which is like your bank statements and your checks that have confidential information, account numbers and things, you need to mark restricted access. Then the only person who can access that would be the district administrator, which is like me, or the administrator for the grant in your club. That way people can't come on the district came on the website from somewhere else and get your valuable account information off your check. Okay, Paul. Oh, go back to that one more, Paul. Yeah, down at the bottom, delete or rename an existing file. So if you click on select document, you can rename that file, or if you decide you need to delete it and reload it because it's wrong or you need something else with it, you can do that there. Okay, you go on. Okay, the forms on www.rotary5790.org, Foundation, District Grant, menu tab for the following forms. All those forms are there along with this presentation. So you can go on there and look at all that and look at the examples if you need to. You can download all that. It's available there now. Last year or the current year forms are also there. So be careful and make sure you pick up the right form. Okay, Paul. Okay, when you get ready for your funds, you've applied for your grant, you've been approved. I need you to send me an email saying we're ready for our funds. And then I submit a reimbursement form to the district treasurer who writes a check and sends it to you. That's real important. I need you to send me an email and request those funds. Payments will be made from September the 1st through April the 30th. So it's important to get your paperwork done and get things done in a timely manner. Okay, Paul. Final report needs to be submitted 30 days after the completion of the project. The final report deadline is May 31st, 2021. Be sure and remember that you have a delay when you write a check, and in order for you to have a cleared check in your bank statement, they won't be available until May if you write them in April. So if you wait till May in order to download those to write your checks for your projects, then they won't be available until June. So keep that in mind, the timely basis for getting your checks written for your projects. Let's see. Okay, the final report form, it needs to be finalized and with the necessary signatures, and the form needs to be dated. There needs to be a detailed listing of all money spent, date purchased, check number, payee, payor, purpose of expenditure, and date of delivery, if available. So all the pertinent information needs to be uploaded to the matchinggrants.org site for documentation. We need a copy of canceled checks. That means the front and the back. We want the back that shows the endorsement, so we know for sure that it was deposited in the correct entity bank account, and then the bank statement showing that check on the bank statement. When you have invoices, we need copies of all your invoices with appropriate dates. We really need you to match up the checks. It really helps if you put the check number and the date you write the check on the invoice as well. So that's where the proof of payment must accompany all receipts. Your Rotary Club is to be the payer on all checks written. Club members can't write checks or use credit cards. If they do to buy products or buy things for your grant, then the club needs to reimburse that member for that receipt. If you write to a nonprofit organization, you got scholarships, you're writing a check to TCC or to university for scholarships, or some other nonprofit that you're participating in your community, then we need a letter from that nonprofit stating the amount, date of gift, and purpose for which the funds will be used. If you do it that way, then what you have to have is your nonprofit letter, your canceled checks and bank statements, and your final report for your documentation. Okay. Scholarship monies cannot be written to individual students. They must be issued to the college or institution of higher education. Documentation showing that the student is enrolled is required. So when you send that to the universities, you'll get a receipt back from the university that they've received those funds for that student, and that student is enrolled. Invoices need to be marked paid with the check number, dated and signed, so that shows that the funds have been spent. Another important thing is no project is to benefit any Rotarian or Rotary Club. So that is critical as far as requirements for your grant. The club also has to have a procedure for retaining documentation of all grant information. That's why we provide through the district the matchinggrants.org website, and we subscribe to that, and everything is stored on the cloud and available for the future. So thank you very much. And it's kind of weird to do this and not look at people and see people in front of you. See if you're raising your eyebrows or looking skeptical or anything. But if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Dan, can I go back 2 slides and make a couple of points and add to what you
Yes,
said?
you certainly may, Sharon. Can you back up, Paul?
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Oh, well, sorry.
Let me get back here.
While he's doing that, just one thing about your bank statements. People often say, why do we have to send bank statements? It's because Rotary requires us to have those as part of our documentation. Please redact everything off of that bank statement except the name of your club. Take off you can blank out all your other checks. Just that one check is all we need to see, or that you wrote. We don't need to see your whole bank statement. So if you don't redact it, when I get it, I redact it. Dan can redact it, but that's how we ask you to also protect whatever you put in there so it will not be accessed. Go back one more slide, Paul, just one more, because there were 2 things on that.
I'm
sorry.
trying to, but the system is not being very friendly right now. Let me see. Okay, here we go. Hold on just a second. Okay, which chart?
Yeah, the second, oh, no, go back. You were on the one I need you. Go down one more. Oh, there you go. That's perfect. Oh, go back.
There's a delay.
Okay, there we go.
And a lot of times I'll click right when you want me to, but there's still about 2 or 3 seconds delay there. Go ahead.
I'm trying to remember what else that was on this page I wanted to tell them about. The canceled the bank statements, invoices. Dang it. It's okay. And then on the next page, a comment about conflict of interest. When he said that Rotary clubs nor Rotarians can benefit. And a lot of our club members sit on boards of nonprofits. And that person may have been the one that brought that grant proposal to you because he sits on that board. And that's fine. All the suggestions can be put on the table, but they cannot vote. They have to recuse themselves from a vote if the organization they're working with, the nonprofit, will benefit from this grant, or if they personally will benefit from this grant. So just be sure that you're very careful about conflict of interest in anything you do with Rotary.
Okay, a
I
quick
think that's-
question, just
All
for
right.
clarification.
Mhm.
If a Rotarian student applies for a scholarship, as long as that Rotarian is not on the committee that makes the selection,
No.
that's not.
It's not allowed by Rotary Foundation guidelines. Foundations cannot give anything to benefit their membership. So if it's their grandfather, their uncle, their brother, their father, their mother, no, they cannot even be considered for a scholarship.
Okay, because the way we do it, the scholarship committee, everything is redacted. They have no idea whose applications they're looking at. They're all numbered. And then
Yeah.
that's sent back to the chair and they do the collations and it's done like that. So there is no identifying information on any of the applications and or essays.
But you know who they are. After they're awarded, I mean, you can't even award one to them. So they shouldn't even be applying for them. And
Okay,
yeah, I mean, you really aren't supposed to do that. The only way I could say you might get around that is if you had the application submitted to an independent committee that are not made up of Rotarians that really don't know anybody, or if you had a local college that's going to do the selection, even though the kids might not be going to that college, a college could provide you a committee to look at them and interview them, and then they'll make the recommendations, but you can't make them. And really, Rotary Foundation money really is not supposed to go to a Rotarian or any of their family members. Just
I'd be
not.
careful doing even what you said there, Sharon.
Yeah. I mean, I just would not do it. We just tell our Rotarians no.
okay,
I
so
wish we could, but we can't.
A Rotarian can't even, well, as long as we're not using grant money,
Oh.
like for Riley, if we're not using grant money, it doesn't matter.
Right. If you want to pay out of your own funds, you can do that all day long.
Okay.
But you can't use Rotary Foundation money, and this is Rotary Foundation money. So if your
Okay,
club has a scholarship, an independent scholarship you're doing with your club's money, y'all just rock on.
Okay, just
But
wanted to be sure. Thank you,
yeah,
ma'am.
I'm glad you asked. Thank you.
So this is Mary Mo, Georgia, and I have a question about this slide as well. Where item number 3, where it talks about a copy of canceled checks and bank statements showing payment. Can we also print copies of those canceled checks and bank statements or the online statement in the account? It seems to me that that would be proof from the bank that the check was paid. So you'd have both of those items, but it wouldn't be a bank statement. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's okay. And what a lot of people do is take a picture on when they're looking at their statement. On their computer, they take a picture of the screen, a screen print, and then they download it and then redact it and then send that to me. So as long as it shows it was the account of your club at the top. I don't want your account number. I don't want the bank's account number. I just want to know your club.
And Sharon, it needs to be more than just the listing of the checks on
Yeah.
when you open that up. It
Yeah.
really needs to be the bank statement itself, which is online.
Yes.
If you're
and
online, you can get that bank statement and download it.
Yeah, download the bank statement and then redact everything but that one check that we have to see. We don't want to see your whole bank account or your bank balances. So I spend a lot of time redacting, but I don't want to see it. And I don't want it put in jeopardy by being on our matching grant site, because we have had people try to get into that and take bank accounts out of it. So it's really important that they're very careful about the canceled checks and very careful about the bank statements. So yeah, I mean, you can take it, the online statement is fine. Dan, do you want to?
You can download your canceled check from that.
Yes.
You know, when you look at that
Yes.
listing of checks online, there's a place where you can print that and it will print
Yes.
both sides.
Absolutely. And that
Right.
works.
Yeah, my question, and Dan, you may be answering in the manner you did because of my question, but my question was really getting to the point of, do we really have to suffer that month-long delay in case you didn't get all your funds to meet the commitment of the grant at the end of the year? Because even though a bank statement has not been formalized, if you go to your banking account online, it will show you what has been paid and obviously it won't show what has not been paid. So are you saying it must be the formalized end of the month bank statement? So you see
Yes.
the beginning account and the end of the account, or is there a purpose other than getting the identification of the expenditure?
Well, a lot of times what you see online doesn't have the bank and it doesn't have your account name and all that on there. So we really need that bank statement.
So the key thing though is the account, the name of the account online. You don't really want the account number.
No.
No.
And most of the bank statements, well, there are some still, but most of them won't put the bank account number on there.
Okay.
Except that they're on the checks if the checks are showing. So, but we really need the bank statement.
Can I ask a question about your question? Did you say
Yeah.
there's a delay? No, her question. The delay in getting your money or delay in closing the grant, or what were you talking
The
about?
the delay in closing the grant. I mean, Dan, you emphasized that when you were going through the slides and everything. And I mean, at this point, we do pretty much everything online, 100%. So everything that we see, I believe we can get screenshots and pictures of checks that have been paid that will include the name of our account or whatever. I'm just trying to ascertain what you're trying to get. What is the evidence you're trying to get that would preclude using an online screenshot instead of waiting for our bank to go till the end of the month and then do a printed format bank statement?
The banking that I do online, I don't recall has all the information as far as the bank and the Rotary, I mean, the club name, you know, and all that. It normally, I mean, you can go to it and it lists all your checks and you can go down the list and open checks up and you see where they've been deposited and written, but it really, we really need the bank statement. So you have to kind of plan ahead. So, you know, if you're gonna, you need to write your checks in April so that you have the bank statements available in May. You know, sometimes things happen and it doesn't happen until May, and we end up having to wait till the 1st of June to get those bank statements. But we would rather not have to do that because we have to turn around and report to Rotary International, and the report is due to them by July the 1st. So that's why we try to get all these things closed out by the end of the year, at the times we do.
And add to that we can't apply for Rogers money for your grants until the other grants are closed out at Rotary, which is by June 1st. So it's really important that y'all close out early so we can get our books closed, because they will not send the money for your year till that is actually closed. They will not release it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is Conrad. Let me make one other point regarding privacy. And I know Scott will bring it up and I'll bring it up in scholarships. In that matchinggrants.org website, there is a place, there's a box there that said restricted access. And if you click on that, then only the proper people within the district can see the things you put on up on that website. So any personal information, club information, et cetera, would not be able to be visible by the general public.
Okay, well, I think in order to keep us on time, we can talk about some of that a little bit later, but that was a really good discussion. And so I'd like to move on now to our global grant management, but I'd like to thank Dan for his presentation. And as Dan pointed out, we have a really good website or a site page on the district website. Under the foundation pull down that you can click on district when you do the foundation pull down, you just click on district grants and you have all the documentation there that you would need to do this. So Scott, I'd like to invite you to join us with global grant management.
Okay, great. Thanks, Paul. Before I start, I've been tasked with keeping attendance, and there's 3 videos that I don't know who they are. So the one that says Samsung SM-G, who are you?
Maybe his mic's not working or something.
I'm not sure, but I don't know who that is, and you're not going to get credit if you don't tell us who you are. There's another one that says just Christopher. Is there a last name that goes with Christopher?
Maybe they can send a...
Yeah, and finally, the last one that I view is just a phone number, 817-894-1060. If you guys would just send me a chat, tell me who you are, I'll get you recorded.
Hey, Scott,
Yes.
this is Chris Castoro. You have me because I'm Christopher, but I think you got my whole name.
Oh, well, I thought I had you, so I'm not sure you were the Christopher.
No, your
Okay.
whole name's on there, Chris.
Yeah. No,
Okay.
I've got you, Chris.
All right, sir.
Just says Christopher. So
I'm going back on mute.
any of those 3 people, just let me know who you are, or if you know who they are. Okay, let's talk about global grants. As Paul explained earlier, there's 2 categories of grants in which we use our DDF that comes back to us from RI or TRF. And one part of those, major part of those, is global grants, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Okay, there is a very specific process that you need to follow if you're going to do a global grant, and we're going to talk about each of these areas, at least briefly, to let you know what they mean. But briefly, you've got to select your project, make sure the project and your club qualifies, do a plan, propose it to the district, get approval there, and then propose it or apply to TRF. So meaning you get approved there, you start your implementation, and then when it's done, you do a final report of learnings and closing out the financials and your results. Okay, and when selecting a project, there's lots of places you can find information about possible projects that either you want to initiate or that you want to participate in. If you're going to sponsor the project, it's real important that you understand what you're getting into, and talking to people who've done projects or worked in the area you want to work is very, very helpful. Matchinggrants.org will show you a page in a minute. There's literally hundreds of global grants on matchinggrants.org if you want to just look to see what might be in a country you'd like to work in, or just learn more about. We've had a grant where I got an email from a lady in Florida saying, I like your grant, here's $500. So it does happen, not very often, but that's a great source for seeing what's going on in the area of global grants. Rotary Showcase, ideas, discussion groups, any place that you might be able to get ideas about what might constitute a good global grant that you'd like to be involved in. This is the page at matchinggrants.org. This is the site that Dan talked about that we rely on heavily and is a very helpful process and tool to use on district grants, global grants, etc. So, and you can see on this example, even global scholars are put on there. So it's very, very worthwhile. It shows you the country. And basically you can read any of these grants, see what they're doing, what their budget is, and what their spending plan is. And you can donate money to the project if you like. Okay, second step is to be qualified. Each club, similar to district grants, has to do a club MOU by the president and president-elect, and that should be uploaded to matchinggrants.org with your description, etc., of your project, if you're doing one. A global grant seminar like tonight, got to have, for a global grant, we expect the president-elect plus one more member. This is a little different from district grants that just requires 2 members of your club. We feel that if you're going to do a global grant, it's important enough that your president needs to be involved in that project and needs to have gone through the grant training. One of the things we look at is contributions to the annual fund, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, but that's always important to see that your club has been a good contributor to causes for Rotary. Got to be current on finances and reporting. If you're delinquent on a previous global grant, you're not even going to be able to apply. And obviously, you've got to be current and nothing outstanding as far as finances are concerned. Upload current 990, tax information, and if you're going to do a global grant, you can't just do it casually. You've got to have people in the club that are going to make sure the project keeps going, and that multiple members of the club are going to be involved. As Dan said, also for district grants, Roger is expecting that you enter at least 13 of the goals in Rotary Club Central, including, and very importantly, your foundation goals for fundraising and other activities. Okay, Paul.
Okay, we're just showing them the website and how to get to the website here on this chart.
Right, the district website, there's a wealth of information about all these activities we're talking about tonight within the foundation, including a section on global grants, district grants, scholars, et cetera, et cetera. This is the next page on global grants. It's got a lot of information, including the roadmap for how to get there. We'll talk about that a little more in detail, but there's a lot of information here, like the global grants highlights page, which is a summary of what you need to do a global grant, and then all of these other pieces of information you may need, like the MOU, overview, etc. So all the information you might need is there, and it'll answer virtually all your questions. Okay, the MOU, I believe Dan talked about this. It's the same information that's required, and I won't go through each step, but it's the same types of information that you have to do for district grants. So if you do one for district grant, you'll already have this done. So I don't know if there's anything else specifically we need to talk about there. Okay, the project itself that you're going to pursue, it has to be an international partnership. And what that means, this is it pretty much assumes your grant is going to be done in a different country outside of the USA. But the sponsor and host applies even if you're doing a grant in the USA. But in most cases, you're doing a grant somewhere outside of the US. Your club would be a sponsor, and they would be the international sponsor. The host club, the club that's in the area in which you're doing your grant, would be the host sponsor. And those are required on any global grant, and there's only one of each. You can't have multiple international sponsors. It's only you. The big issue for global grants is sustainability. It's always been an issue. It's become an even bigger issue in the last few years. It's got to be sustainable. You've got to demonstrate how it's going to be sustainable. And even if you think you have, you still may not have done a good enough job, because this is a hot button with RI. We've been doing grants in Honduras, 8 of them for 15 years, and we're not sure we're going to be able to do another one because we're having trouble meeting RI's requirements on sustainability. Your project has to fit into one of the areas of focus. I think we've got that on a slide in just a minute, so I'll talk more about that. You've got to invest a total of $30,000. And in other words, the total project must be $30,000 or more in the area in which you're working. There's what's called a needs assessment that has to be done. And that is basically can be a survey, it can be interviews, it can be whatever will identify the need in the area that you're trying to do your project in. Why is it important? Why is it needed? Also, what will the project do, or what will it accomplish? And ultimately, you want to strengthen the community's capacity to meet its needs. Sustainability, you're going to hear about it over and over and over if you go after a global grant. These are kind of the steps to ensure that a grant is successful. Start with community. That's usually a needs assessment. You want local involvement and ownership. Training. You want to buy as many of your materials locally as possible. That's an expectation of Rotary. Get as much local funding as you can. And when you're done, measure your success and learn from whatever problems and mistakes and successes that you've had. These are the areas of focus we talked about. Your project has to fit into one of these areas of focus. They're pretty broad. It's not hard to fit into one of these because they cover so many different things. But we also found out just recently that the verbiage has changed a little bit on this. And I don't think the intent or the overall description of the area of focus has changed, but a few of the words have changed, and we'll update that. But I don't think it matters in terms of picking an area in which you want to focus your project. Oh, well, the other point on that, excuse me, Paul, if you go back, you'll notice that every area of focus is really 2 areas of focus. Every one has an and in it. You have to address both parts of the areas of focus. For example, when we do water works in Honduras, we also do sanitation training to meet the requirement for sanitation. That's now area of focus is called water, sanitation, and hygiene. But we address the other parts of the area of focus by doing training on hygiene and sanitation. Okay, planning, very important in anything, and particularly important on a grant like this where you're doing a pretty big project usually. Relationships and partnerships in the area where you're working. This is your host club. This is organizations in the area in which you're working that are important to your success. Depending on what you're doing, it can be the health department, it can be local authorities, it could be school administrators. Again, depending on where you, it could be a hospital, depending on what you're doing and where you're working, we have found that this is critical to success. You've got to have good long-term relationships with people there. And if it's a critical partner, you'll have to do an MOU. They'll have to do an MOU as well with you, where they will state that they understand what they're doing, what they're getting into, what types of information they'll provide, and how they'll help make the project successful. I said earlier, you've got to do a community assessment. That's to make sure there's a real need. that the people want the help, that it's the reason it's necessary, the area of focus is covered, and very importantly, ensure that it's sustainable. Got to have a budget and funding. Where are you going to get your money? We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But funding is usually a combination of your club's funds, other clubs in the district, other clubs outside of the district, and even individuals that don't even have to be a member of your club. All those qualify for funding and for matching by RI. You've got to define your total budget in some detail that says how you're going to spend the money, where it's going to go, what you're going to use it for. Long-term commitment, again, we just emphasize this all the way through the process, that it takes a lot of work and usually a lot of times. A lot of global grants can take 2 to 3 years to be completed. Funding. As I said, you can get club contributions. You can get individual contributions from Rotarians. That money is matched 50% by the Rotary Foundation World Fund. You can get money from people outside of your club. We've done this on a few occasions where someone wanted to help. They give their money and it'll be matched 50% as well. DDF stands for District Designated Funds. This is the money that we get back from Rotary that we sent in as a district 3 years ago. That money is divided to do district grants and global grants and other things as well, like scholars and polio and those types of things. That money, if you get it approved for your project, is matched 100% by the World Fund, the Rotary Foundation. A really great way to fund your project if you can get agreement from the District Grants Committee. Okay. Okay, let me give you an example of how a grant might work. The club or clubs come up with $10,000. It doesn't have to be this much, but this is just a good example. And that's probably a number that's near the minimum you're going to need. But that can be from individuals. It can be from your club. It can be from other clubs in the district. That gets matched 50%. That would result in $15,000 to your project. The district, if you could convince the grants committee, would throw in DDF, in this case, $10,000. One of the things that we look for, and it's a guideline, is that we expect the club investment or the investment by all the clubs to be no less than the amount of DDF. So if you came and your club was putting $1,000 into the project and no other club was putting money in there, and you came and asked for 10,000 DDF, you'd probably have a tough time convincing the committee they should do it. We're looking for commitment from the clubs or their partners clubs that are throwing in money as well. DDF is matched 100%, so that would be a total of $20,000. That would create a project that total being $35,000. That meets the requirements for a global grant. First one being that TRF puts in at least $15,000. And the second one being that a global grant must total $30,000 or more. So this is kind of minimum funding that you would do for a global grant. Okay, this is the financial page on matchinggrants.org. You can see that that's a grant number, the G1270. That's not the Rotary application or grant number. This is done separately. And this is an example of how the financing would be done for a grant. This is a rather large grant that our district and our club participated in. You can see they've got the lead club, and in this case, this is the international sponsoring club, is Edmonton in Canada, and they're putting up a lot of cash, and their district is putting up a lot of DDF. So that's funding a total of $57,000. And that's without the match from the Rotary Foundation. You can see Another district has put in money, 4250. I think that's probably the home where the project is. It is. That's in Honduras. You can see they have other clubs that are donating money. And you can see that one of those clubs is my club, the Arlington Club. We put in $5,000. This club is a club we've worked with in the past. And we also, they ask our district for DDF. So 5790, the District Grants Committee approved $2,500 in DDF for this project. And then the other monies are club monies, and also another district there, 5340. So they've got, I think, 3 districts that are putting up DDF. That's a fair amount of money that gets matched 100%. And because of that and the cash that clubs have put in, you can see this is a very large project. But anyway, this is the funding page that you would do for your grant on matchinggrants.org. One other thing to note that's important, a few years ago, Rotary instituted a requirement. If you're going to get Paul Harris credit for the money that your club puts into a global grant, you have to put in an additional 5% fee for funding support from RI. So if you put up $1,000 and don't put up, or you want to designate $1,000, you won't get Paul Harris credit. If you put up $1,050, you'll get Paul Harris credit for that money. So it's important, whether you're doing a grant or whether you're just participating as a contributor to another grant, that you understand that. Okay, the money can get kind of complicated, especially when you're matching and you're putting up extra 5% and et cetera. So RI has what's called the Global Grant Calculator. It's at rotary.org, and you can plug in your numbers.
Sign-in verification system. Please, your sign-in was successfully verified. Goodbye.
And this is a tool that we urge you to use because it'll make sure your financials are correct, especially if you're doing an application and sending it to RI. And it just lists the clubs, the cash they're putting up, and the match, the extra 5%, your total contribution, the World Fund match, and then the total funding for the grant. So this is a very important tool, very accurate and easy to use. It's a spreadsheet, so it'll calculate everything for you if you just put in the information. Okay, financial management. You heard Dan talk about this. This is equally important, if not more important, for global grants because it's more money in each project's case. What we do is we expect a dedicated bank account, not just money that's going into your club's account and going out. This should be a dedicated bank account. Rotary expects this, and it makes things so much easier. I've done a grant where I mixed it with our club money. And when it came time to send in the information to RI, I had to redact out everything that wasn't associated with the grant. And it made it very confusing and very tough for RI to follow too. So what we do now is require a dedicated bank account that starts with 0, tracks any debits that go into the account, and any money or expenditures that go out. So this dedicated bank would be used for distributing your funds. You can use checks, bank cards, but if there's a dedicated account and the money's coming from there, there'll be a good record of each transaction. And again, when it comes time to send in that final report, you simply send in the bank statements for the time period in which you were working. The ledger should be clear and each entry should be recorded, and that's pretty easy with a bank account. And if there's local laws, you need to make sure you're adhering to those. What Rotary actually would like is for the bank account to be done by the host club near the area where your project is going. It doesn't have to be, but that's their preference. And you have to have a good reason if you can't do it that way. So again, there may be some local issues you need to make sure you're aware of, or more importantly, your host club is aware of. Okay, once you've identified a grant and you're ready to get moving, you need to make a proposal to the district. And this goes to the District Grants Committee, which Paul heads up as the foundation director. And he leads the team. And this is the kind of information you'll have to do. First, as I said, you've got to be entered on matching grants. We won't consider your request for DDF if your project isn't on matchinggrants.org. And we use that as a document to see what you're doing, who's doing what, who are the sponsors, and what your funding look like and what your spending plan look like. So this is just a critical requirement and a critical way to follow the project. The contacts, description, budget, funding, all that is on the website. You would present your project to the Global District Grants Committee. Our first deadline is September 1st. So you would have to be on matchinggrants.org and you would contact Paul that you want to attend the meeting and ask for DDF. Again, you want to ask for DDF. It's the best, usually the biggest component of funding for a project because it's matched 100%. So if you can get 5,000, even 10,000, you know, you double that, and that can go a long way toward funding your grant. As Dan said, in the district grants, in the first meeting, you are eligible to designate 25% of your contribution 3 years ago. We'll know what that is. You can go online where Paul showed and see what it is. But if you want to designate that amount of money to be DDF for your project, you're pretty much assured you're going to get it. If you have other clubs that want to designate their share of their DDF to your project, you're very likely to get it. So that's a great way to back up your request for DDF as well as the worthiness of your project. That first deadline is September 1st. If you're unable to make that deadline, we meet again early November, and again early February. In those latter meetings, we don't guarantee that your DDF share is yours, but there's still a good chance that you can get it if that's what you're trying to do. And all that is, just latter meetings are prefaced on whether there's DDF funds available. There usually is, there always have been, but there might be a case where all the money got used up at the first deadline, then there really wouldn't be an opportunity to get DDF after that. So early is better. And the amount you contribute 3 years ago or every year is very important. This is the site that Dan went over in his presentation, matchinggrants.org. You know, get your self-registered, put in the information on there. It'll walk you through what you have to fill out. And again, it's very similar to what Dan went over, what you're doing, the area of focus, and the description of your project. And all this information will show up on matchinggrants.org. If you go to their list of projects and click on your project, you'll see this information there, including the host partner, the international partner, your budget, your funding, etc. So it's a great tool for monitoring, and the committee uses it as a way of trying to track your grant, see if it's worthwhile, and see what type of financials you put into it. Okay, just quick review of those things we went over. These are resources, matchinggrants.org, the Global Grant Calculator, and then the Global Grant Application template is at ri.org and rotary.org, and it'll walk you through the steps to apply. But it's fairly cumbersome, and you've got to have your ducks lined up to be able to get your application approved. Okay? Okay. For TRF, again, you've got to fill out the form. It's actually pretty easy to follow. Just answer all the questions. The funding is a spreadsheet, and the spending is a spreadsheet. So it'll track your money for you. The numbers have to match up. Whatever you say you're collecting has got to be what you're spending. And after you fill that out, you submit it, and then it has to be authorized by a variety of people. For example, if you're including DDF from our district in your grant, Paul has to sign off on it. If you've got DDF from another district, their district foundation chair has to sign off on it. So there can be up to like 12 signatures. Your district governor has to sign off on it. And the club president has to sign off on it. So, you know, it's a fair amount of signatures, but it is automated. The authorizers will be notified, and they can go online and authorize it online. So as long as people are aware of it and they know how to get there, it doesn't necessarily take a long time. Usually you got to bug people though to get them go on there and approve it. Okay, implementation. Let's say you got a great plan, you got district approval, DDF, RI has signed off on it. The next thing they'll do is ask for the money. You send in all the money to them, and then they'll send it back to you or to your bank, basically your dedicated bank account. That's where they'll send the money. So what's included in project management? Well, financial control, again, you've heard Dan talk about this. You'll hear it in any kind of grant activity. And it's critical because it's your money, it's our money, it's RI's money, and we expect good stewardship. Again, the dedicated bank account, it's got to show the releases of money. It also shows the funding as it gets there. Generally, that's the transfer of funds from RI to your dedicated bank account. Got to keep receipts for your spending, particularly the spending on the ground in the area where you're working, etc. So it's pretty much what you would expect for financial control. You want to have regular checkpoints with your partners, and really you want to stay in touch constantly to make sure things are happening. If you're working in the third world, it can be really hard to get things done. So it's really important you have good partners on the ground in the area near the project that can keep you updated, keep things moving. Records retention, you want a methodology for obviously the banking information and the receipts and anything else that pertains to spending for the project. And then verification of results. This is something you'll have to review in your final report. Did you meet your objectives? And these aren't the objectives you think they are today. They're objectives you wrote in your original application. That's what you'll be expected to comment on. Generally, grants don't deviate much from their original plans. You can deviate, and you can even switch what you're spending money for, but you want to let RI know when you make that decision, and you want to explain it clearly in your final report. And ultimately, the result you want is that your beneficiary has the needs of your beneficiary have been met. Okay, report. You've got to do a final report. It's required by RI to close out your grant. Very importantly, you want to review what you did right, what you didn't do as well, and what lessons you learned. What's the feedback from the partners that you worked with and beneficiaries? And this is all intended to learn and to improve the process for future grants. The final report goes to TRF. It's not nearly as detailed as your application. For example, you don't have to send in receipts. You have to have them if they ask for them, and you have to keep them for 5 years, but you don't even have to send them in. You have to send in a summary of your expenditures but you don't actually have to send the receipts. If you have big receipts, it's a good idea to include them with your report. Retain the documentation for 5 years and update matchinggrants.org. The great thing is to go in there and say you've completed the project and you're successful. So those things you want to make sure you have good records on.
I would add to that putting photographs of your project, of your completed project, or maybe some interesting photographs of the event are really great. If you put it on matchinggrants.org, you can go back and use those from time to time to do a presentation or just be aware of what you accomplished.
Yeah, that's great. And a lot of people do that. You can see that on some of, and a lot of them do it before the project is complete. You also want to include pictures and other documents in your final report. I just finished one about a month ago, and I probably had 15 or 20 pictures in there because they really illustrate your results and what you did better than just about anything else. So yeah, that's great. You want pictures and you want documentation.
Okay.
Any
There's
questions?
Scott, are you taking questions?
Yes.
This is Karen McDaniels. Hi.
Karen, how you doing?
I'm fine, thanks. When we talked about the district grants, which have a duration of 1 year, Dan talked about providing the IRS 990 form. When you're doing a global grant that could be multi-years, do you only need the first 990, or should you have the 990 for each year that your grant is going on?
It's a good question. I think initially for the application, it's only the current year in which you're applying, but it probably makes sense to include subsequent years as the grant goes on.
Okay.
Paul, do you know, I mean, our requirement is just when you apply to us.
I think you're right. I mean, as far as the way we've been implementing it, we've only been requiring it the first time out, but that's something we may want to consider in the future. But typically we're applying for the money, we're getting the money on the front end, and that's when we are checking the 990. So once we've made the commitment and funded the event, I don't know what leverage the 990 would give us at that point, except for future grant applications.
Okay. So Scott, you've done multi-year global grants and you've only submitted one 990?
Yes. Well,
okay.
Our club does every year anyway, so.
Okay.
But we only, like Paul said, we only require it when you're applying.
Okay. Now the IRS might, be interested in your 990 for other reasons, but with regard to that,
especially for Karen, I would recommend it. You bring up another good point though about duration. I've had global grants go between 2 and 3 years, and there's always good reasons for it. But what Rotary will require, as far as your final report, they will tell you it's due 1 year after you receive funding. So if it takes a long time for the application, that's okay. But once you're approved, your money's in and they send you the money to your dedicated bank account, you have 1 year from there to implement it, close it, and do your final report. However, if you cannot meet that goal, you can send in an interim report explaining why you're taking so long. And they'll accept that, and then you can wait until you're done for the final report.
Yeah. They've been really great about it this year because of the coronavirus also. If you submit the report that you want an extension, it's not been a problem.
Yeah, I don't think it's ever been. I've done it a couple of times, and they just said, okay, just make sure you explain why.
Yeah.
And we always had what we thought was a good reason.
Hey, Scott.
Thank you, Scott.
You bet.
Scott?
Yes.
It's Chris Castoro. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Okay, so this sounds pretty complicated. if we go, let's say the club goes to matchinggrants.org, my club does, and we find a project that looks really good. You know, it looks like it meets a need. It's got some, it strikes us at our heart somewhere. We want to give it $5,000, let's say. Do we have to go through any of these hoops, or do we just write a check?
No, you do not. You want to put your information on matchinggrants.org so that it's visible in their financials. You can do it or they can do it. But no, you just have to send them a check. And what happens when the grant's approved, Rotary Foundation will ask for the money. When you send in the money, or if you haven't got it in a central location, each club sends it in. But let's say you do. You list each club and the amount of money they put in. And like the global grant calculator, whether or not they put the extra 5% in there.
Well, my point is, if my club wants to do it, just my club wants to make a contribution.
Yeah.
And what happens if for some reason the project fails? What happens to that money?
Well, if it never gets off the ground, it'll get returned. But you know, if it doesn't go very well, the money's not going to come back.
What would you recommend? You've got a lot of experience in this. What would you recommend for a club that really doesn't want to start? We don't have the resources to really start one,
Exactly.
but we'd like to support one. What would you recommend?
Again, you can give money to any project you like. We've had about 45 clubs that have contributed to our grants in Honduras. And that's just a matter of telling us and making sure your club and amount gets listed when the club sends in the multiple donor form to RI.
Well, my point is, looking at globalgrants.org, is there a way to tell, I don't know how to put this, whether it's the real thing, whether it's really gonna be working? And
well, I mean, you can read the description. It's only as good as what they wrote. But
let me add a couple of things, because I've had experiences where clubs from other parts of the country liked a project we were doing, and they either, in many cases, they just do a pledge, and the pledge goes down. They can send the money directly to Rotary International or to the Rotary Foundation with that pledge, or it can be consolidated at the club level. And I think with Scott has consolidated a lot of his Honduras grant contributions at the club level, but I believe it can be just consolidated at Rotary International when the Rotary International is ready to fund it. But I don't want to miss this opportunity in that we are currently looking at doing a large global grant to help with the COVID-19 pandemic that we've got going on. And we are very interested in having some clubs in our district help support that. And that would be in the form of a reverse global grant, where we have a international sponsor in Australia that's willing to act as the international sponsor and would help us fund a large project in this area in our district. So that's something that I think Sharon might be sending something out about fairly soon. We hope that we can get all the I's dotted and T's crossed pretty soon on that particular project. And I may be premature in letting you know about it, but I would hope that we could get something going on it pretty soon.
Hey, Scott,
Yeah.
you have some chat questions. Can you see the chat? Do you want me to read them to you?
Let me see. I hadn't got.
There's one that asks, why do you have to have 12 plus signatures?
Well, it's not always 12, but again, your president, your primary sponsor, your district governor, your
Foundation chair
has to authorize it. If you've got money from
you multiply everything times 2 because you're dealing with 2 countries too. So
right, and then if you've got DDF from other districts, the people there have to sign off. So it can be as many as 12. That's on the average, it's probably a little less than that, but it's on the average, it's probably 8 to 10.
Then the other one was, is it required to send reports in future years to show sustainability? What does it mean, quote,
No.
obtain all approvals?
That's just the authorizations online
Okay.
for your application or your final report. They require authorizations as well. You don't have to send, well, generally you don't have to send reports for the future because you'll have to satisfy Rotary before they approve your grant that you have in place a process that will ensure sustainability.
But you do have to do reporting.
Well, after you do your final report, you don't have to report again.
Okay, but if it goes 3 or 4 years, is it quarterly or semi-annually? When do they do them?
Your reports,
Annual report.
starts 1 year after you receive your money,
Okay.
and then you'd have to do it again a year after that and a year after that if you're not done.
Okay. Thank you.
And explain what's going on.
Okay. I think that's all I saw.
Okay, good. Good questions.
Okay.
I had a thought, and I can't remember it.
Okay, well, if everybody wants to stretch for 30 seconds, we'll get Conrad up to talk to us about global grant scholarships.
I'm ready to go.
Let's go.
Okay, all right.
Get it over.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, so Rotary Global Grant Scholarships will be used to fund 1 or 2 years of post-baccalaureate study at a recognized university in a non-U.S. country in a study discipline that supports the object of Rotary and the mission of the Rotary Foundation. Applicants cannot be Rotarians nor be directly related to a Rotarian. This year, as in other years, we'll be awarding 2 scholarships. This year, they will again be $40,000 scholarships. The timeline is, we can go through the timeline, but the important thing right now is to identify candidates. And you look for candidates by contacting your local colleges or universities, even community colleges, and asking them to recommend some special individuals that they might know that would qualify for a Global Grant Scholarship. The candidates would complete an online application. That application, Paul and I will update just change the dates for this coming year. It will be again on the district website. And then we have the application should be completed and submitted to me by the end of October. So by October 31st, I should have a complete application where the club has approved their applicant. We have all the transcripts to date, obviously not the final one, but the most recent, and all of their recommendations should be part of that application. Then we will hold district interviews on Saturday, November 7th. And we have a committee of 5 people. None of the folks on the committee will have a dog in the hunt. So it'll be strictly arm's length interview. Once the district selects the candidates, now they are district candidates. They do not have the application, do not have the scholarship at this point. At this point, the candidates, the club that supports the candidates needs to complete the application on matchinggrants.org. There's no sense doing that before they get selected by the district committee, but immediately after they go on matchinggrants.org and submit that application, which is our permanent record, and it's kind of a training exercise for the actual global grant application on rotary.org. And then the candidate must attend the GSETS training for Global Grant Scholar candidates in Houston on January 9th of 2021. We're not sure exactly where it's going to be in Houston. The hotel they've been doing it at has been undergoing renovation, so we'll let the candidates know at the appropriate time. The important thing is the candidates, their studies must, again, the first thing to remember is that a Global Grant Scholarship is a grant. So everything that Scott has mentioned about a grant applies to a global grant for a scholarship. In other words, you have to have a sustainable sustainability in the project. You have to have a significant outcome, and those are defined a little differently. A significant outcome is that somebody completes their master's program in peace and conflict resolution studies, those kinds of things. Sustainability is an interesting aspect here because the scholar has got to demonstrate that they have been involved in, let's just take, we'll take a candidate that did not make it. This gentleman was a graduate of the Naval Academy, obviously well qualified on the face of it, but he was majoring in something like, I think, accounting at the Academy. He wanted to get a Global Grant Scholarship to study civil engineering and water engineering in Chile. And then when the Navy got him for his 5 years, he wanted to go into naval intelligence. So there's 3 different areas of concentration. There's no sustainability. Sustainability here is that somebody is a medical student. They're studying. Their undergraduate is in pre-med or biology or chemistry or something like that. Their volunteer work has been in clinics and those kinds of things. And then once they complete their undergraduate work, they're going to get a master's degree in medical humanities or some additional courses in medicine, and then they will continue on with their studies to get an MD degree and then spend the rest of their life studying some aspect or working in some aspect of medicine. There's the sustainability in this particular thing. So these are some of the pictures of some of we just went through the timeline. These are some of the pictures of some of our past scholars. I have never met a scholar who was not somebody that was extremely exceptional. I mean, these folks that we're supporting are going to change the world. It's just phenomenal when you sit on the interview committee and you talk to these folks. This is a very competitive scholarship, and I want to tell you, those people that get it are going to change the world, literally. Paul?
Let's see. So
there's a timeline.
There's a timeline, and I think you've already covered a lot of that.
Yeah, okay. Let me just talk about the candidates you're looking for. Obviously, this is a post-baccalaureate scholarship, so they have to complete their 4-year degree. But beyond that, you're looking for somebody that has excellent leadership skills and potential, a proven record of success in his or her academic field or vocation, a commitment to community service, well-defined and realistic goals, concrete ideas for advancing within his or her chosen field, and sincerity about maintaining a lifelong relationship with Rotary after the scholarship period. I have an outline, and I think, Paul, that was one of the slides. There's an outline on the district website that has all the information that any club would need to submit a candidate and follow through on that application. We always try to have 4 or 5 applicants. We look for applicants from every end of our district, and we've had applicants, a lot of applicants from the Metroplex. But we're looking for more candidates in the Abilene area, Wichita Falls area, and everything in between. So any club can submit an applicant as long as they follow the guidelines that Scott put forward. In other words, they have to have been regular givers to the Rotary Foundation over a period of time, and their clubs are up to snuff in terms of the financial reporting, et cetera, et cetera. But other than that, any club can submit a candidate for consideration. Are there any questions?
Yeah, the chat from Janelle wants to know what GSETS is, and I'd like to know as well, what is GSETS?
GSETS is the training program for scholarship applicants that is done statewide in Houston. And there's a group that puts that on every year. Paul Geisel's always been a speaker at that. And most of the program is put on by past scholars. And it's an orientation program that tells the scholars, what to expect during their experience, how to keep track of their financial receipts, et cetera, how to do reports, what to do in terms of getting along where they're going to be staying in that foreign country, how to behave and the things to get involved in, the things to avoid, and those kinds of things. So it's an extremely good program, which is why it's a required program. And it's a one-day program. It's on a Saturday. Generally, the scholar applicants get there on Friday night, and there's an informal get-together on Friday night, and then Saturday is the program.
Conrad, do they have to find their own housing when they're there, or does a district there find housing, or how does that work?
It depends. The scholar and the Scholars Club, again, this is a grant, which means that clubs in our district that sponsor a candidate, we are the international sponsors, and you have to have a partner at the other end. So you have a host Rotary Club within the district that the scholar is going to attend school in. So most of the times the scholars find their own places to stay, which would be campus housing, those kinds of things. In some cases, the host club will be asked to help them find residences. Sometimes we've had as many as 3 scholars rooming together in an off-campus apartment. There's lots of resources available. I have a counterpart in every single district around the world, and they have a committee that helps the scholar get acclimated. The host club, of course, they will, most cases, will pick up the scholar at the airport. They'll help them establish bank accounts. They'll get them involved in all kinds of scholar activities within that district. The London district, for example, we've been sending a lot of candidates there, and they have their own orientation program that even our scholars will have to attend, and then they involve them in all kinds of things. I mean, not only district conferences, but any kind of projects that are going on over there, and those kinds of things. The scholar get-togethers where all the ambassadorial or global grant scholars get together and get to know each other in that district, and even sometimes multiple districts. So it's a very warm, welcoming experience for these scholars.
Okay, any further questions?
Yeah, and just one other thing, again, this is a grant, and just like Scott just went through in great detail, you have to do a report. You have to do that application online, just like Scott said, and then at the end of the year, if they finish their scholarship experience, they can submit a final report. If not, they have to do a 1-year interim report. And then once they complete their studies, they'll do that final report. And that will include receipts. for tuition, et cetera, et cetera.
Very good. Well, thank you very much, Conrad. That's excellent report. And if there are no further questions, I think we're ready to move on to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Jim Quick, professor at UTA. And also his brother is a renowned expert who had a very multi-page article in the Rotarian magazine very recently talking about pandemics. So that was pretty interesting. But Jim Quick is going to talk to us about the Peace Fellow program. So let me...
Peace Fellowship program in our district got started when Dan Morales got me focused on seeing if we could get a Peace Fellow. It's a very competitive program. It's smaller than the Global Scholarships. There are only 100 a year awarded. There are two different tracks. So we've been in the game since about 2007. And you see on this page the Peace Fellows, the most recent one being Eva, that came from through Conrad and the Grapevine Club. He had mentored her for several years. But our first one was Jay Gilliam, who came from the Rotary Club of Arlington. And Jay was actually mentored through the application process by Jeff Whitfield, who you see on the right, who's in the now the Rotary Club of Fort Worth. At the time, Jeff was a distinguished graduate of the U.S. Air Force Academy on assignment to Luke Air Force Base, and learned about the Peace Fellowships and won one in the very beginning and studied in Bradford, England. Cody Griggers, who was our second Peace Fellow to do the master's degree, is now in a key position in the UN. He was in the sweet spot. For those that go to the 2-year degree program, the sweet spot is 30 years of age. You've got to have top academics, and you need to have minimum 3 years of experience. And then Cade Mosley went to Japan, where Jay Gilliam had gone to earn his degree. And Cade had a law degree before. He was an old man, 35, when he won his Peace Fellowship, but he's still practicing in Japan. The other two are Kirk Driver and Eva, both who have done the certificate program in Thailand. Kirk in the spring of 2018, and I said Eva just finished up now, just before things got shut down in terms of international travel. And she did get back to her husband in Amsterdam, is what we understand. Next slide. So this talks a little bit about the Peace Centers and the 2 years master's program. There are 5 locations, one in this country, Duke, UNC in Chapel Hill, International Christian University in Japan, Bradford in England, Queensland in Australia, and Uppsala is actually the newest peace degree location in Sweden. You need to have top academics. Jay Gilliam went to Amherst. Cody Griggers was a graduate of Princeton, and Cade Mosley was a distinguished graduate of UT Austin. And as I said, Jeff Whitfield was a distinguished graduate of the U.S. Air Force Academy. And you see there the sweet spot, 29 or 30 years of age, need experience. And Rotary doesn't require any longer a club interview and recommendation, but the district does. And Rotary also thinks a club interview and recommendation is something that really is important. So why they eliminated the requirement, I'm not quite sure. Okay, next slide. This is the certificate program, 3 months, 90 days in Bangkok, Thailand. And people that are ideal for this, the average age is about 40. Kirk Driver was an old man at 48, but top student in the TCU MBA program and a police officer captain in the Fort Worth Police Department doing peace and conflict. He was really driving at getting at the underlying causes of crime. So people like that, people like Eva who are passionate about peace and conflict resolution. And then another potential profession for people that might go into this certificate program would be people in the medical community. And I think the last slide has the pictures of Kirk Driver on the left and Eva on the right, who as I said, just completed. Is there one more slide, Conrad? I mean, Paul?
I guess just the.
Oh, that's
application
from the
timetable.
website. Yeah, the website contains this information. I did a program Monday for the Arlington North Rotary Club at noon. And we do have a couple of months to finish up, but I've only had 2 contacts this year for prospects. One, the club will probably bring that person forward next year. The other person that I communicated with, I referred to one of the Peace Scholars to get more information. I wasn't quite sure whether there would be a good fit because it's important for there to be a good fit. It's very competitive. Kirk Driver, the year he was, and he is a Rotarian, so he won a Peace Fellowship, but he got no money from the foundation to go to Thailand. He needed to be supported by the Rotary Club of Fort Worth and by the Fort Worth Police Department. And they only allow 1 Rotarian in the 25-person class. They do 2 a year in Thailand. And I think he was the first one to win a Peace Fellowship in several years as a Rotarian. But he was one of 1,000. There were about 1,000 applicants his year worldwide. About 500 of those got endorsed, and then only about 100 got selected. So a very competitive program.
This is just another view of the website, and there's a lot of resources listed on the website and links and so forth.
Yeah, and that starts with a quote. Actually, turned out I didn't realize that it was one of my classmates in college. He and one of my fraternity brothers started the International Center for Nonviolent Conflict in the early 90s, and they hooked up with a Rotarian, and Jack was quoted in the April issue of 2006 Rotarian. Those for whom peace is no more than a dream are asleep to the future.
Very good. That's well. Does anybody on the line have any candidates in their related in their community? I guess that they might want to bring forward, because it's just a wonderful opportunity for the right person. And some of the scholarships go for a couple of years, right? I guess Kate and Jeff and Jay.
Yes, the master's degree is a 2-year. Yeah, we've averaged a Peace Fellowship about every 2 years since 2007.
And as you said, there are just very few of them awarded every year. So our district has done it extremely well with as many as we've gotten.
And we also have 2 Peace Fellows currently residing within the district who both have been helpful in mentoring and culling other successful candidates. And not everybody that comes to us, Paul and I actually worked with a very capable young woman who had been turned down for a peace fellowship coming through Washington, D.C., and she wanted to come through our district. And the ultimate decision she made was a global scholarship fit what she wanted to do better than a peace fellowship. And then we had, because of the way they've opened it up, you can apply through any district in the world. We had somebody from Nigeria, and when we looked at the file, we could not understand how there was a fit between his credentials, his background, and doing a very rigorous peace fellowship.
Well, very good. Well, I was piecing together some of your slides this afternoon, so you did extremely well with what I ended up with.
Thank you, Paul.
Well, very good. Well, this is great. I think if there are some questions, we'd love to hear those. I'm not very adept enough with Zoom to go through all your chat messages, but if anybody has some questions, speak up or let us know. And otherwise, we'll let our president.
Paul,
go ahead.
Paul, this is Conrad. Let me just, I neglected to cover one thing. We have the 40,000, the Global Grant scholarships are $40,000 scholarships. It only requires a $1,000 contribution from each Rotary Club that submits an applicant. And so the district puts in $19,250 in DDF, which is matched 100%, and 1,000 is matched 50%. So that's how you get the $40,000. But it's just $1,000 commitment from a Rotary Club, plus the 5% fee from the foundation.
Yeah, that's an excellent return on investment right there. It doesn't get any better than that.
That's correct.
Pretty amazing. Well, folks, I think we're finishing right about on the time that I had forecast, unless there's some further questions, but I'd like to give the opportunity to DGE Roger, and if he would like to make any further comments.
Thank you, Paul. This is great. One thing to remember, everybody on here, is we have a wealth of information in this district, and we do incredible things. Scott Hendricks asked for you to go jump in the chat and give your name and what club you're with. But other than that, let's everybody go home, or I guess we are home. But let everybody wrap it up, and really appreciate everybody being involved in this. And I'll tell you guys that everybody that put this on, y'all did an incredible job. Thank you.
And I would like to just put one more advertisement in for the meeting next Saturday, and I hope that most of you will register for that event. And it is a great way to fully understand the, let's see, I think I just hit the wrong button. I was trying to bring up I had a different presentation that I was trying to bring up, but I was just trying to show the advertisement for the next Zoom meeting assembly for the Rotary Foundation, where we'll go into detail about the polio fund, the annual programs fund, the endowment, and whatever else I'm missing. But that's a great way to understand the different funds of the Rotary Foundation. I think we'll also talk about the new disaster response fund and so forth. So I bet I see John Bullock up there. He probably would like to put in a plug for polio right now, I bet. So as a matter of fact, we're homing in on our goals for polio for this year. We were trying to get $25 per Rotarian for polio, and we're looking like we might possibly make it with a few more contributions from the clubs. And if your club hasn't contributed yet to polio, please be sure to do that. And I'm sure we'll be making similar plugs next week for the annual programs fund and the other funds as well.
And that's going to be Thursday night at 7:30, right, Paul?
That is correct. So thank you folks very much for your time and attention and all the support that you give us during the year.
Thank you, Paul.
And maybe I should also give our ARRFC a chance to speak if she would like to add anything. Sharon, are you still there?
She said
She
good night
said
a few minutes ago.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Sharon
she
left.
said good night in the chat.
Okay, yeah, well, she's always got quite a few balls in a few other districts that she has to deal with, so I understand that. Okay, thank you, folks. Appreciate it.
Thank
Have
you
a good
all. Good
evening.
night.